Being an entrepreneur is incredibly challenging. I'll go ahead and say right now that I know that if I had to do what my parents did, I would have not done it. I would have quit. I just would have gone to get a job with benefits and just signed up to do something else.
All right, Ryan Crafts, welcome to the Venue RX podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I'm excited to chat and kind of dig into your story a little bit more. It's a little bit different from what I understand from some of our other venue owners that we have on the show. And that's exciting for me. I love kind of learning about our industry, and you guys do a lot more than just venue ownership. So I'm excited to dive into your story and how you got there. But could you kind of take me back and give me a little bit of maybe a professional and personal background on you prior to getting in the wedding industry?
Yeah, so going back, we have to go before I was in the wedding industry, we have to go back almost 40 years. Because my parents started a catering company in 1984, so 39 years ago. I was just 4 years old at the time, and this was after they had several failed Italian restaurant, a failed Italian gelato shop. They had done a few things, but always food and always hospitality. And they weren't always the greatest of cooks or chefs, but they were always the consummate hosts. And so I remember growing up, they were always entertaining in our home when they weren't helping someone else entertain offsite at throwing a party. So I grew up in the family business, and I did everything from maintaining and pulling all the weeds in the strawberry patch and the tomato garden and in the rhubarb fields to washing dishes, to changing oil on the trucks. And mostly I worked that job as a young teen all the way through high school, paid my way through high school, paid my way through college doing that. Eventually I gravitated and was mostly working front of the house event management. So running weddings, running large corporate events, those sorts of things. And wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. It was the only professional work I'd ever known. I had studied philosophy in school. I had a minor in ethical theory and an emphasis in ethical theory and a minor in peace and justice. So when you study the liberal arts like that, unless you want to go on to grad school and be a professor, you got to be an entrepreneur somehow or just stick working in the family business. Around that time, my parents divorced, and it was kind of a catalyst for my brother and I to decide if we wanted to make a career out of the family business or not. They were embroiled in a lot of legal stuff for a long time with their divorce, and they had always been owner-operators. And so for them to not be around running the family business put a lot of strain. And so my brother and I kind of stepped in 2010 and took over a lot of the day-to-day management. We bought the business from my mom in 2013. And so it's the only professional work I know is special events and food. And food and staff is the core of what we do, but we do lights, we do tables, we do chairs, flowers, security, valet, entertainment. If it's what a party needs, that's kind of what we specialize in. And
is this all in Utah as well?
All in Utah. Occasionally we'll leave Utah. Sometimes we go up to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Sometimes we go out to Colorado, sometimes down to Vegas. But 95% of what we do is in Utah, and 90% of it's right along the Wasatch Front. Salt Lake City, Park City, some of the suburbs of Salt Lake. That's where we work. And that's what we do. And that's all I've ever done professionally. And so for most of my career, we were working in other people's venues, and we were working in people's homes, in their offices, and then in dedicated special event venues. And sometimes along the way, we had been asked to manage someone else's venue, and we had been asked to run it and market it and sell it and manage the calendar and the whole thing. And so certainly with all of the events we were doing, which in 2019, and for a lot of you, was over 1,000 a year. In 2019, I think we did 1,100 events a year. And most of those were in someone else's venue. So we had a lot of experience seeing all the different types of venues, all the different ways they market, they sell, the things that work, the things that don't work. We had managed several venues on behalf of other venue owners as well. Our first venue that we owned was called the Tasting Room, and that was in Salt Lake. And we initially just needed a sales office, and we needed a tasting room, like literally a conference room where we could run small tastings for our wedding clients, that sort of thing. And we just couldn't find a space that we liked. We'd been leasing a space for a long, long time, and we had to move out. Couldn't find a space we liked. And then we found a building that we really, really liked, but it was big and it was expensive, and we couldn't afford it just like as a sales office lease payment. But we figured like, hey, we could rent out the upper floor of this. And then we could use the ground floor of this, not just as a sales space for our wedding planners, but we could use this as an event space. I mean, we could sit down 100 people in here for a formal plate of dinner. We could have 300 people in here for a cocktail party. And so we bought that building, and I want to say that was 2012 or 2013. It was sometime right around the time that we were buying the business from my mother. Maybe a little before.
And this is so the business that you bought from your mother was catering, was event planning, kind of a mixture of those two things.
Yeah, so Culinary Crafts is the parent company. It's the main core of the business. It's the umbrella. The tasting room became our first venue that we didn't just run or work at, but that we owned. And then a few years back, I want to say it was our Park City venue was the second one that we owned, and the Kimball Terrace. It came online, I want to say, right around January of 2019. And that's, so we have two venues that are our own venues, and we own and operate them, and they're part of our brand family, and they're, we are the owners there. Logistically and operationally, what's interesting is when it comes to actually doing an event there, we don't treat them very differently than when we treat every other venue that we work at here in Utah. We still have our headquarters at a different location. We still come in and unload day of, just like we would if we were at someone else's venue. We are able to run things our way and keep a little bit more of our equipment in stock and in place. But in a lot of ways, it runs just as if it were an off-premise operation at someone else's venue, which is kind of something I think that's a little bit different. I mean, there are a lot of caterers that are in the venue business, and whether they started in venues and got into catering or vice versa. But I think caterers that cater across such a broad geographical area, who treat their venues logistically like any other long distance, off-premise venue, is something a little bit unique about our operation.
That's very cool. And that's such an interesting story. Your story is very unique to the typical venue owners that I talk to, because you did come from kind of the catering, event planning side of things into venue ownership, management, things like that. You mentioned that you managed venues before you bought the two that you currently run, right? Could you walk me through that? Like, was that a difficult process? Because I think we probably have, people listening to this show who have thought about getting into venue ownership, and maybe the ownership hurdle is a little bit too high because of the financial component, but maybe management is a little bit more attainable. I know that's kind of where we started, and we're now looking to purchase our first venue. And so can you share that a little bit with me in terms of like the experience you had with managing venues versus just owning them?
Yeah. Really, it just became a natural extension of what we were doing as event producers and event planners and caterers. In our catering operation, we're not always the event planner. We often are, but sometimes there's an out-of-state or a local event planner who's coordinated all of the details, and we just come in as a subcontractor under them. But oftentimes, we're a larger vendor who's spearheading the planning, and every event's different. But as a result of all that experience, we had seen the whole gamut of the way that events work, and we had developed a lot of relationships with venues. And there were several venues who wanted to own a venue, but didn't want to manage it, or who already owned something that had venue potential. They just had like a beautiful, $30 million mountain estate that they only come, a handful of weeks out of the year, and wanted to have it generate some cash flow in the downtime, but they didn't know, they don't live here, they don't stay here, they don't know anything about, the local event world and all those logistics. And they just wanted someone to come in and kind of, run it as a venue. And so it made a lot of sense for us to do that, just because then we had a shoe in the door to do the event and to do the catering and to do the event planning and to sell the food, because that still is the core of our business. And so helping with the management on some of those venues that didn't always want to manage themselves was a natural fit for us, because we were familiar with all the ins and outs of what it takes to produce an event and what it takes to keep a venue running smoothly and happy and not. And so it was just a natural fit. And so we had a wide array of contracts and agreements sometimes for management on those things. Sometimes we were the exclusive vendor. Sometimes we were, just in the first right of refusal position. Sometimes we paid a fee to be, management. Sometimes they paid us. Most oftentimes there was just simply a revenue sharing arrangement, commissions going one direction or another and different things. But that certainly helped our catering business and helped build a lot of relationships. And it certainly helped us not be so intimidated when the chance came to, purchase our own building and to open another venue and do different things on our own and make them part of our actual brand family.
That makes a lot of sense. Tell me, so we kind of went back. Let's go all the way forward, and then we can kind of unpack a little bit of what you're doing that makes you successful. And because you have this family business background, and I think so much of our industry is family businesses in some form or another. I'm curious about some of your reflections with that. But where are you at now? What does your portfolio look like? I know I have Kimball Terrace pulled up here. It's gorgeous here in Park City. But what does your current portfolio look like?
So our current portfolio is Kimball Terrace is definitely one of the jewels, especially from an aesthetic and a marketing point of view, because it's a beautiful building. It's right on Park City historic Main Street. We have a balcony that faces up and down the historic Main Street, and you get to see all the cool buildings. And we have a rooftop patio that faces out towards the ski slopes. We have an indoor space that can hold around 250 people. It's the only dedicated event space on Park City Main Street. So when the Sundance Film Festival rolls into town, when all of the other cool Park City events are in town, there's lots of spaces in Park City that run events and run beautiful events. Don't get me wrong, and we work at a lot of them. In fact, during the Sundance Film Festival, I've got crews at our space and then 4 or 5 other spaces, within a block. But a lot of those spaces are law offices, or they're art galleries, or they are bars or nightclubs, and ours is dedicated just for special event rentals. And so when it's not having a special event, it's really a blank slate. It's really kind of easy to bring in whatever event style you want. And so the Kimball Terrace is really kind of a gem of our portfolio in terms of venues. And we're really, really proud of that. And it's gaining a lot of steam as well. It's picking up in popularity. We're doing a lot of events this summer. We just had a great Sundance Film Festival in January with Audible was our main client, and they were hosting some really, really cool parties. And so it's a great addition to our portfolio. The other venue, the Tasting Room, is a beautiful space. It's downtown Salt Lake City. It's just about a block due south of the Delta Center where the Utah Jazz play. It's about 2 blocks west of the Salt Palace where all the big conventions are at. It's got a great urban vibe. We really love the space. We've owned the building now for a long time. To be honest, that venue right now is probably one of the pieces that has been slowest to recover from the pandemic. I think there are several reasons for that. Some of them were of our own choice, and some of them are just market forces out of our control. We are doing lots of things to focus on reactivating that space and trying to get it to roll forward. And one of the things we're working on, this is still the very, very early stages, but we're working on perhaps turning that tasting room venue into not just an event. Right now, if it's not my sales team having a meeting there, it's a dedicated event space. It's a large empty room. We bring in custom event rentals to suit every unique event. It's kind of like the Kimball Terrace, a blank slate when it's offline. But we're thinking about changing that and opening a wine bar, not a full restaurant. I don't want to, spend $1 million on a hot kitchen and line and the whole thing, but wine and meat and cheese and something really cool, and possibly doing some really fun installation there that would get more traffic moving through that downtown Salt Lake space on a regular basis. But again, since our core business is catering and hospitality services, we want to make it still open and available for special event venues, because special events is what we do. And so that's something that's in the early stages. We're working on the zoning and the liquor license and all that kind of stuff. I don't know when, honestly, I couldn't even put a guess on when that might come online, but that's something we're working on right now. And part of it's because we think it's a great fit for the location, and part of it is a way to reactivate the building post-pandemic. And part of it's just because I want to be able to tell people that, you know what, we should meet at my wine bar. I just want to be able to say that at some point, for a meeting.
Yeah.
But, so that's one of the things.
I was going to say, for anyone, because, this is on YouTube and podcast, and for anyone listening on the podcast, do yourself a favor and click, we'll put the links and everything in the description, but check out both Kimball Terrace and the tasting room. I pulled up the tasting room while you were talking. It's a really cool space. The facade is neat. It's this urban space. You've got the wood in there. You guys take really good photos of the interior. So it's really cool to see how, you've used the space. Guests have used the space. Both of these are really aesthetic spaces. So props to you guys. It's very cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
In addition to the two venues, what other business ventures are you in that are kind of in the hospitality realm?
Primarily catering and special events. And so, like I said, we get a lot of calls direct, and we go and we do weddings. You can't be a caterer in Utah and not do weddings. Weddings are big here. But certainly prior to the pandemic, weddings were actually the lesser share of our business, probably 35%, and 65% was corporate business, especially destination to Utah convention business. So big conventions that come into Salt Lake or come into Park City, and they've been having meetings in the hotel all week long. They want to get out of the hotel ballroom, and they want to have a cool off-site party with some fun activities and some delicious food and a great bar outdoors and enjoying, all the natural beauty of Utah. So that is the core of that. Before the pandemic, that was our bread and butter. 65% of our events, and probably 70, maybe 75% of our income was from those kind of events. Those are not quite as full steam as they were before the pandemic, but they are coming back a lot. We're still doing a lot of that. And so catering to those events is the core of what we do. And we work with a lot of clients direct. We work with a host of wedding planners, many of whom are local experts. Some of them are out of state. We work with a lot of local DMCs and destination management companies who are just hired they do everything from, they pick the guests up at the airport when they arrive. They take them to the hotel. They arrange for all of their breakfast and whatnot. And they do a lot of their VIP events. And so for those VIP events, we work with a lot of DMCs. And so we're just kind of a custom special event provider. And that's where the core of our business is. We do a few other things. We do some pop-up events. Sometimes we do consulting. Sometimes we do partnership events. We do travel to do, a little bit of consulting. But really, in terms of our income and our operation, those are a minuscule percentage. Most of what we do is catering special events and running those venues.
That makes sense. I'm curious how your role has evolved over the years, because with how you started, doubtless you were doing everything, a little bit of everything, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm curious how your role in the organization has evolved. Are you at the venues? Do you actively sell the venues? Do you have a team? Kind of explain your journey through just growing this little hospitality empire you have.
Yeah, that empire is a generous term. We'll get there maybe one day. It's happening.
The wine bar.
I'll take it. The wine bar. Yeah, maybe when that comes on, we can start calling it an empire. Yeah, like you said, you can't be growing up in a small family business, especially a business that when I was young, my parents were bootstrapping with no cash in the bank and was growing very slowly. And there was a point when we were homeless. And they were still trying to run this catering business. We still had the kitchen because that was all that they could afford to rent on. So I've done everything from a small boy washing dishes and weeding the garden to through high school and college, I mostly ran events. During the summer times, my dad would wake up my brother and I at 4 a.m. and drag us into the bakery to help make bread and cookies and cheesecakes. And I hated that. It was awful. It was the worst thing in the world. I hated our family business, and it was so stressful, and it was brutal work. And it wasn't until I started going on the events and got to be able to move around more, set up tables, interact with guests, and occasionally get to help the chef grill the fish and grill the steak and to grill the chicken. And something about standing over the fire, even when it's hot in the Utah summers, was a lot of fun. And, at 16 years old, we did a big wedding at Lake Powell, and I got to help the chef grill. And I was like, hey, maybe our family business isn't so bad. Spend most of my time as an event manager, where the rubber meets the road, night of the event, setting up tables, serving down plates, mixing drinks, whatever it took to work in the front of the house, and be client and guest facing. That really became my primary role. But along the way, whether if I also worked in the office, I did a lot of our HR and payroll at certain points. I did a lot of fleet management and rotated a lot of tires over the years. As my brother and I took over day-to-day management, I certainly took much more of a senior executive role, supervising operations and having some of those event captains report to me, head of marketing report to me. My brother is much more on the sales side and on the financial side. And we definitely have the areas that we focused on. But it really helps, I think, my brother and I both to have, even though today we definitely have our focuses and we have our silos and we have the areas that we manage, but it helps both of us that we had seen up close and worked for a lot of years in almost every area of the business. And some of them much more recently than it might seem when you look at how big the company is and how many employees we have and all the events that we do. Because, once the pandemic hit, I was out changing oil in trucks again, something I hadn't done for 10 years, but I was doing that again. And my kids were coming in and they were washing dishes on Sunday morning. And my wife and I were cleaning the bathrooms in the office, so that's kind of what you do when you're a small family business. And as we've come out of the pandemic and we are starting to turn things back on and we're doing more and more events again and we're having a lot of fun and we're making money again. And in some ways, it's been really, really great that some of the lessons that I learned during the pandemic and some of the personal time that I got, I've had to give back. But a lot of it, I haven't. And we have an amazing team behind us. And we have a whole sales and event planning team with several just ace event planners who work for us, including one who manages the Kimball Terrace as a part of her full-time role and sells and plans most of the events that happen there. And so, I deal with a lot of things. I deal with contracting. I do supervise a lot of the marketing, and I, make sure I'm not writing most of our menus. I'm not writing most of our recipes, but I have done a lot of that over the years. And so I kind of do a little bit of the final proofing and, editing of those things. And, I do a lot of quality control and taste tests, which is fun. But my favorite part of my job now is when my venue manager at the Kimball Terrace says hey, Ryan, we have this really cool client. They're coming in from out of town. And we have this great lineup of Park City products that we're serving and showing up at this event. Can you just show up and be available to roam the room and talk all about these cool Park City products and these cool Utah foods and all sorts of things? And that's kind of my dream job. If I could just go to parties and talk to people about food who want to hear about it, then that's the most fun I've ever had. It's just going to parties and talking about food, and where I don't have to deal with, oh my gosh, we had a flood last night in the basement of the venue, a water pipe burst, and who's gonna call the emergency service to come in and dehumidify everything, and who's gonna do. We have a lot of people who handle that, and so I'm really, really fortunate now in 2023 that we have recovered quickly enough from the pandemic that I can get back to mostly just talking about food to people. So
now I've really seen it. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious about the family business side of things, because I actually, my wife and I own our business together, our management company together, and we manage 5 venues here in Southern California. And we had a staffing company before that, and it's been, we've got 5 kids now. My wife's pregnant with our 6th.
How old are your kids? I'm curious. What's the age range of all of these kids?
10, 7 at the time of this recording. 10, 7, 5, 3, 1, and then the newborn.
Cool.
Here a couple months. Yeah. But, my 10-year-old, my 7-year-old, even my 5-year-old, they've all touched, tables, chairs, stuff, move things around, wash dishes, like all of those pieces they've done. And I remember growing up hating entrepreneurship, actually, and thinking that it's like the most sketchy thing, the most risky thing, right? And my dream when I was growing up was like, go get a good college degree, get a steady job, get into a good college so you can get that steady job. And then I found my way back to entrepreneurship, which my mom was the entrepreneur. My dad was more the career guy. I'm curious, in your journey through entrepreneurship, maybe really disliking it in the beginning, like you said, and going through some of those really tough times to where you are now. What do you think changed? What are some of the things that changed from that style of business that maybe your parents were running to how you're running business now that's created a situation that's not as painful?
Yeah, it is. Being an entrepreneur is incredibly challenging. And I'll go ahead and say right now that I know that if I had to do what my parents did, I would have not done it. I would have quit. I just would have gone to get a job with benefits and just signed up to do something else. And honestly, even if I didn't have my brother as a 50-50 partner, I don't know if I could run this business. If I didn't have such a great team behind me with so many people who are really, really good at what they do, it would be more than I could handle. It's all the stress. When the stress is high, is as much as I can handle, and that's with my brother shouldering half of it, and that's with a great team that's doing a lot of the legwork and some experts who are in their own roles much better than I ever was. And so it's hard. I know that if I was trying to launch a business from the ground up, I don't think it's in me. I just don't. I watched what my parents went through. I've watched what some of my fellow peers in the events world or in other industries, here in Utah, being entrepreneurs, have gone through, and that's not in me. I do think one of the things that helped me is that I was buying a business that was built, and my parents had done the first 20 years of the hard stuff, and
what was that?
They had built it. They had built it as big as they could grow it, and they had done very, very well. But that was where my brother and I, although we could never do what they did, I at least certainly couldn't do what they did. Also, they could never do what my brother and I have done, which is come in and take a business that we know like the back of our hand and we are very intimate with. And not that we're not willing to work as hard as they did, but the stress and the long suffering of what they went through, I just don't think I could take it. And so, but we took a business and then we made it more efficient. We made it more scalable. We made it a little bit more modern, and we were able to grow it and grow it and grow it. And we're still seeing a lot of growth. Also, Utah is just like red hot and awesome place to be an entrepreneur in. And so that helps us a lot. But yeah, every entrepreneur has a different road to hoe. And I'm really fortunate that I had the opportunity to buy an established business where I didn't have to grow it from the ground up. I just had to come in and make it better and make it bigger and shore it up. Because I do think I have a lot of strengths in that regard, as does my brother and our team. And so taking something from good to great was something that I felt suited to. When I was finishing up my undergrad, I couldn't decide if I wanted to go to law school or if I wanted to go to grad school and study philosophy. There was a moment where I thought, I was like, you know what? I'm going to open a motorcycle shop, and I'm going to paint choppers, and I'm going to build bikes, and it's going to be so awesome and fun, and I'm going to build hot rods. And as much as I was into the cars and the motorcycles, I was like, oh, wait, suddenly I'm going to have to run this business like the way that my parents were running a business. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't do that.
You ride?
I do ride. I don't ride as much as I once did, and I certainly don't spend as much time with the wrench or the paint gun or the welder like I did in college. That was a hobby and a side moneymaker in college. Once I had kids, it just didn't seem nearly as important anymore. So anytime I could be out on the bike, I'm like, well, why am I out on my motorcycle when I could be out on the mountain bike with my son, or out on a run with my wife, or skiing with my daughter? And so we do a lot more of those kind of things these days, and the motorcycle tends to collect a little more dust.
Oh, totally fair. Totally fair. I ride every chance I can get. I have a Harley, a lowrider ST that
Nice.
is a lot of fun, and I love it. But yeah, once you start adding kids and some of their responsibilities, the priorities shift around a little bit. So that was really cool. I was asking that question, Ryan, because I think we have equal amount of listeners on the show who are building something from the ground up. They're maybe buying a piece of land and building on it. Maybe they're wanting to start something, wanting to start a business in hospitality, start a venue. But then you have other people that are buying existing buildings. They're buying businesses. They're inheriting businesses from their parents. I've talked to venue owners, who the venue or the property has been in their family for 50 plus years, and they're coming in and taking it over as part of an inheritance they received or something like that. And so I was curious about kind of sharing your journey through that, because I think that's a journey that a lot of people go through, not necessarily starting it brand new, but taking something existing and saying, okay, how do we tweak this? And what do we do differently to build on the foundation that's already been laid? And so I really appreciate you sharing that. Moving on a bit, I'm curious about how you are marketing. How are you getting business specifically for the venues? Are you running ads? Do you guys do a lot of like social media stuff? Is it word of mouth? What does your marketing strategy look like when it comes to the venues?
So we do a lot. Every individual brand has its own website. The catering company is the big one. Both of the venues have one. We even have a website for a bar company. We acquired a bar company during the pandemic. They had been a subcontractor of ours prior to that. And it looked like they may close during the pandemic, which we didn't want to have happen. So we came in and were able to acquire them and keep some of their employees around. And so each one has its own website. Each one has its own social media. We don't run a lot of ads. We do run some, and sometimes we run an ad just because we haven't done that for a while, and we want to make sure that we're still casting nets in different areas and casting a wide net and having a multifaceted approach. Sometimes we run ads simply because there's an opportunity to do it on trade, and so a local magazine is hosting an event, and they want catering, and so we will come in and we'll negotiate something where we will take a significant chunk of the catering invoice on trade, and then we can run an ad in a local magazine. We do a lot of charity events where we're a sponsor, and that's been really great. At the Kimball Terrace, we host several charity events where we waive the rental fee and we just charge them cleaning and staff costs and different things, and that brings a lot of people into the space, and helps us connect with the community as well, and those are effective marketing tools. And so it's multifaceted, but by far our number one, because we don't do any cold calling, we don't do any knocking on doors, we don't go pound the pavement. We don't go looking for leads. We don't call up companies and say like, hey, who plans your events? And could we talk to them and maybe talk to you about doing your next one? We're really, really fortunate that all of our leads are incoming and they're all warm. And so they're all people who have an event and are looking for a place to do it or are looking for a caterer to service it. And, obviously not during the pandemic, but for the most time, that gives us as much business as we can handle. And on busy Saturdays in the summertime or busy Saturdays in the wintertime, we actually have to turn people away anyways. And so We're really fortunate that we don't have to chase too much business. And so most of I think if you were to like Google search us, you would see a lot of social media and you would see a lot of websites and you might see some ads and sorts of things. But the way we market the most is by just local networking groups and building relationships with other industry professionals and other industry partners. And so when we are, we attend a lot of the local visitors and convention bureau meetings, and we attend a lot of the Chamber of Commerce meetings, any industry specific networking groups, we attend those. And if we are going to spend $1,000 on a magazine ad or a radio spot or something like that, I would probably just rather spend $1,000 taking all of my favorite wedding planners and DMCs out for lunch or coffee or dinner or cocktails or something like that. Because we get more business, whether coming to the venues or to the catering company or both, through referrals and through direct business from those wedding and event industry partners than we do from people who will call us just by having searched for Utah caterers or Utah event venues or something like that. Years and years ago, we used to go to the bridal shows, right? Yeah. Where it's a giant hotel ballroom and it's full of thousands of vendors and everyone has a booth and everyone's good. We, of course, we're pretty proud. And so we would not go to those unless we were prepared to have the biggest booth and the best booth. And we would go big and we would spend a lot of money producing an event. And we would talk to hundreds of brides. And we would probably book 5 or 6 big weddings. But we probably would have booked 4 or 5 of those anyways.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to this huge thing and we're spending 10 grand or more and we book one event that we wouldn't have booked anyways, and the profit on it isn't as much as it cost us to be there. And so we haven't done that kind of marketing in a long time. Long time. And I'm sure that there are opportunities that we miss because we focused our efforts in certain places and not in others. And I'm sure there's money that we're leaving on the table at certain times because we're focusing our efforts. But certainly for us, in terms of efficiency and marketing spend and longevity, we are focusing primarily on networking with other industry professionals and building relationships with other industry professionals. And I often have to remind my marketing team, hey, on Instagram, we're not chasing likes, we're not chasing clicks, we're not counting followers. I don't care if we have 100 followers or if we have 1 million. Now, it would be nice to have 1 million because then we could probably start to leverage that into some income of its own. But to the degree that Instagram is not its own income, it's just trying to market the catering company, I'm not interested in clicks or views or likes. I'm only interested in the quality being an extension of the website, which is an extension of our office, which is an extension of our personalities and of ourselves. And so I want them to have a similar experience as if they came to our office and they tasted our food and they spoke with us in person. Because in special events, you're not like a restaurant where you can just run a promo and hope that you're going to get a few more people to come in on a Friday, Saturday night. It's like, hey, free appetizers this weekend, because nobody books a wedding on a whim, right? Nobody books, a product launch just like, hey, we should have a big party this Saturday and just throw it all out. We're going to spend thousands of dollars and tens of thousands. The events that we do are months, sometimes even years in the planning stages. And these are the sorts of things that you don't just, book on a whim and you can market to with some hot and catchy promo. These are the things that people are looking and they're asking for recommendations. They're working with trusted partners and they're not scrolling Instagram to find caterers and then decide to throw a party. Or scrolling Instagram and seeing a venue, it's like, hell, you know what? We should book that. When they finally are ready to book a party, they will go and get recommendations. Then they may look you up. They may look you up at your website. They may look you up at your Instagram. And so everything needs to be fresh and everything needs to be polished. But the sort of things that are chasing views and chasing clicks, I think, at least in our market and for our brand, have not been an effective strategy. And so just like making sure that the brand is fresh and the brand is available, but focusing most of our efforts on trying to connect with people face to face here in Utah has been by far our best ROI.
Ryan, that is such good advice, I think, for anyone in this space and venues specifically, because you're totally right. I mean, running promos, and it's not a buy now, get one free sort of purchase decision. It is, you're totally right. You're planning something 9, 12, 18, 24 months into the future. And it's going to be done in a more calculated way than like, hey, this Saturday is a great day to put a deposit down on a venue. Like, they're probably planning for it, the couple, right? They're thinking about the finances. The business is saying, hey, we're coming up on this milestone, or we need to start planning for our quarterly or year-end event or whatever. So that's an interesting mental shift, instead of thinking about social media or thinking about, PPC or some of these different things and trying to like drive traffic. Instead of that, just making sure that your brand is synonymous with the real life experience that your team has across the board. I love that.
And it's tricky to think like, okay, well, next summer, I want to make sure that I'm booking some weddings at Kimball Terrace. And so, but I don't know who those brides are. Some of those brides aren't engaged yet. And I don't know where they live and if they're going to be. And so I think the traditional approach is like, okay, well, you got to cast this wide net. You've got to be on Instagram and you got to be on TikTok. And we don't even have a TikTok account anymore because it was just like too much of a pain in the neck to be worth it. And you have to be on all these places and you have to be casting this wide net, and hopefully one of those brides will see you. And there is something to that. So we do have content in a lot of places, but where we spend most of our money is we'll throw a party at our venue where we will put out the decorations and the lights and the music, and we'll make our venue look as badass as it can. And since we don't know who the brides are, we can't invite them to this party. But I do know who the wedding planners are. And I do know who the photographers are, and I do know who the DJs are, and I know who the florists are, and I know who the rental companies are, and I know all the other people who are going to be involved in these weddings next year. And somewhere along the line, they are going to be the ones who are going to be like, well, who should we call for our catering, and what venues are still available, and which place is a good fit if I want to have this many people, and so I invite all the people that I can think of in the industry that may be talking to the brides next summer. And we invite them to our venue. We put a beautiful drink in their hands. We give them some delicious food. And we just basically give them a fun night on us. We give them a free date night on us, and kind of course, flex our muscles and make the venue look pretty and make the food look sexy and delicious. But that is where most of our efforts go, is to networking with those people. Trying to market direct to the end client is so hard and not very efficient, just not very efficient marketing.
Yeah.
That has to be a piece of it, but it shouldn't be, it's not a primary focus of what we do, because it's just, the ROI is so low.
That makes a lot of sense. Ryan, I want to wrap up today just asking, what does the future look like for Culinary Crafts? And I love the name. It's super, super neat. And I like the brands. I like what you guys have going on. It's super, super cool, and very, it was fun doing research on you guys as I was, preparing for this. But what does the next 3 to 5 years look like for the brands? And I mean, I know, like you mentioned, there's maybe a wine bar in your future.
Hopefully a wine bar. Hopefully the Kimball Terrace picks up even more steam. It has been, we opened the Kimball Terrace. We couldn't get our permitting in 2019 in time to book our big clients for the Sundance Film Festival, because the whole business model of the Kimball Terrace relies on the Sundance Film Festival. And so we didn't do it in 2019 because we were just a little too late getting the building finished and open and permitted. And so big contracts we didn't get. And then we did a huge film festival in 2020, but then of course with the pandemic, we didn't do one in 21 or 22. So we've been open for 5 years. We've only done 2 film festivals. So hopefully we don't have any more pandemic and we can keep doing the film festival, which then really sets us up to have a successful year. Kimball Terrace really looks to be a big piece of our focus going forward. And then more of the same, doing more events in Utah. I don't have any plans to expand outside of Utah. Utah has always been home. We would need to bring in another partner if we ever were to do that, because I don't want to move and I don't want to travel. But it might include more venues of our own. And so there might be something similar to the Kimball Terrace in a different location, perhaps in Utah Valley near the point of the mountain where we have a lot of tech companies coming in. It might be something in the same area as the tasting room, but bigger in downtown Salt Lake. It might include other, if the wine bar is successful, it might include a whiskey and burger place someplace. So there's lots of ideas we have. But it also will include just a continuing focus on special events, because I have high hopes that Utah hosts another Winter Games at some point in the next 10 to 15 years. And if that's the case, then we just want to have a huge catering crew that's ready to just knock it out of the park and do a ton of cool events and meet a lot of cool people and serve some delicious food and really just do hospitality, because that's really being an entrepreneur isn't what gets me out of bed, and having cool pictures on Instagram isn't what entertaining is what gets me out of bed. I do this all day, every day. And then when I have a night off, I invite friends over to my house and cook some more and open some more wine. And because that's really, I love entertaining, just like my parents did. There's a lot of things that I think my parents were crazy about, but a passion for entertaining and hosting people is something that I still do. But there may be things that I don't even know are in the future of the company, because we have a great team of leaders, and they have a lot of passions and a lot of skills, and more they are running the show. And so, what my director of sales, and, my catering director and my executive chef, they may decide that they have a cool new passion project, and we may have an opportunity to fund that and open new arms of the business that I haven't even thought of yet. So that's kind of the nutshell of what I'm hoping for the next 5 to 10.
That's really exciting, and that's neat when you do have that team that you've grown. So that's awesome. Well, Ryan, thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing your story of the business, how you guys have grown, how you guys have weathered some of the storms, and the marketing pieces, and just I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us today.
Well, thank you. My pleasure.
If people want to reach out to you, they're interested in seeing Kimball Terrace, tasting room, any of your brands, what's the best place to connect with you guys at?
Any of the websites, but the main one, Culinary Crafts, has a contact us page and form, and you can call the number and ring the office. You could just fill out the thing there, and we'll email you back. Since they're all just part of the same brand family, all the emails go to the same place. And so whether you email from Kimball Terrace or Tasting Room or Culinary Crafts, you'll connect with me or my team, and pretty straightforward.
Cool. Awesome. Brian, thanks so much for coming on the Venue RX today. This was a fun conversation.
Yeah, you're most welcome. My pleasure.